Welcome back to AI News Without the Hype. We're going to be looking at a new line of robots that are cleaning bathrooms. We're going to talk about new voice model from Grok that Starlink is using to sell subscriptions. Why is Google investing in Anthropic, even though they're a competitor? And a big mistake Anthropic made and how they're dealing with it. So we're going to jump in. Let's go through these stories one by one. So first of all, we're going to start off with a legal angle. Elon Musk has been suing OpenAI and their co-founders Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, and he recently dropped the fraud claims. So what's going on here with this case? So basically the backstory is that Elon Musk was one of the first investors in OpenAI when it was a nonprofit. It was eventually converted to a for-profit company that may or may not be illegal. Elon is alleging that he was essentially defrauded as an investor, believing that it would go into an open source mission, and instead it became a closed source for-profit company. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the legal analysis because that's not my field and I don't understand a lot of it, but I do think it's an interesting story, so I wanted to bring it up. So they dropped the fraud claim, but when I first saw this, I was like, wait, I thought this was the whole thing. What is he backing out of the claim? What happened here? Did they settle? But no, actually what really happened is that the fraud was just one of several charges, and they felt the legal side for Musk, they felt that by keeping fraud in there, it sort of confused the whole landscape of charges and could potentially cause the jury to become confused, which you never want to do when you're suing somebody. So they're still suing them for breach of charitable trust and unjust enrichment. Fraud specifically is much more difficult to prove because it requires clear intent and deception. And it makes sense. This is something common from my small legal knowledge. I do know that generally it's considered not wise to have too many charges that can confuse the jury when they don't understand the technicalities of the law, what one charge differs from another, and how they have to sort through those. So they're dropping their fraud just to make it a little more clear cut. So that's the story there. Now we're going to move on to some other stories here. Let's talk a little bit about this release from OpenAI called GPT Image 2. And the results that people are getting with this is absolutely incredible. There's like this big trend right now of people making fake trailers for video games that don't really exist. And they just look absolutely fantastic. I mean, they look like work that was spent, they look like the top games that you could possibly get, the top graphics you could possibly get. And people are creating these, from one prompt. So really, really incredible to see the image and video progression. And this is one of the most exciting areas in AI because we've had text for a while now that keeps getting better and better. We have coding that keeps getting better and better. But there are still major limits of what you can do with images. Even when you get the quality there, when it comes to the whole editing experience, it's not there, especially for video. But will we see a big change where people are actually going to be able to create legitimate productions for things that are longer than a few minutes and that are very creative? Now, I tend to think that no matter what, there will be a major space for Hollywood movies, for example. I mean, I think the idea that Hollywood is going to be killed by people being able to create their own movies with AI, I think is ridiculous. I think that people are going to prefer to see the subtleties that you can get with video production that you will have a much harder time getting with AI no matter what. And to see genuine actors, real people, even if the quality is there. I mean, think about it. Even if the quality could be 100% there, there's still a difference when it comes to a dramatic production, feeling like there's a real person conveying the emotion. Again, even if the AI can mimic it 100%, you're still going to feel differently knowing there's a real human behind there than you are knowing that it's just AI. That's what I think. However, I think in other areas, like for example, video games, when it's all invented anyway, you can have AI taking potentially 100% of that in some cases. Now, when I say 100%, again, with any production, you're going to need humans involved, obviously, in terms of judgment on taste, in terms of all sorts of things. but it is interesting. And are you going to see a case where people can create their own video games themselves or customize it the way they want? And I've heard that as well with Hollywood, where like you could create a movie and then you could enable people to customize that movie through chatting and customizing it, and it could turn into, whatever you want. So there's going to be all sorts of interesting business models that are going to emerge as well. Now, I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about, in that regard, the jobs front. And I talk about this a lot, almost every episode, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But the more and more I think about it, the more and more I tend to agree with the take that Anthony Pompliano had on X. I think he stated it really well a few days ago, at a Pompliano on X, Pompliano. And he, like me, says that he believes that AI is basically going to make companies more productive. And if the companies are more productive, they can produce more things that bring them revenue. They're going to hire more people to do that. It's just simple fact. So yes, there can be a lot of displacement that can happen because people without AI skills might have to catch up in certain ways. If you're trying to get an entry-level white-collar job right now and you don't know how to use AI, I think any smart company, to be blunt, is not going to hire you. Any forward-looking company is not going to hire you. Because what are you even doing if you're a white-collar worker and you haven't had a relatively deep understanding of how to use AI? What are you even doing? So that would be a problem. And so, yeah, I see that as being a big negative if you're trying to go into the job market like that. But overall, companies can make more money. They're going to hire you. They're going to have you do more work. And I think you're going to see more and more, let's just say software engineering, for example, you're going to see more and more a requirement to have taste and to sort of own the end-to-end production stack. So like, can you read a customer bug or a feature request, understand it, understand how to implement it in a way that the people will like, and basically bring that to product all the way to where you're ready to hand it over to the marketing team to present that? Or can you even go a step further and even understand it to an extent on the marketing level of how this fits into the overall appeal of the product? So I think people are going to become much more like owning a larger piece of the supply chain and executing it with taste and with understanding of what's right, what's wrong, being able to look at code, being able to know the right questions. How do we get the right security into this? How do we get the right architecture into this, etc.? So that's where we're headed. And I want to move on from that. So let's talk about this new release by Grok called Grok Voice Think Fast 1.0. So this is a new voice model that handles complex multi-step workflows. But Starlink is now replacing call centers with AI, and they're getting like a 20% conversion rate for callers to sell them on getting a subscription and a package with Starlink, which is absolutely incredible. And 70% of support calls are resolved without a human ever touching them, which is also incredible. So this is really neat to watch. There's been sort of a slow rollout in AI handling support and stuff. And in part, it could be because the tech has been there for a while already. I mean, this is a use case that was envisioned almost from the beginning of ChatGPT's release. And yet most companies have not really rolled it out. And part of the reason could be that people just prefer to talk to humans. There's a lot of complexity to executing it properly. Obviously, the strength of the model. There's a lot of risk because you don't want the call center leading people in a way they don't like. I mean, there's nothing worse than talking to a robot that can't give you the result that you want. You have a lot more grace for a human, but it's like, if you're a robot, it's like you're supposed to be doing one thing, which is doing this flawlessly, perfectly, and fast. And you're not good at it. Can I just talk to a human? So it takes a lot to really execute it right. From a technology standpoint and from a business standpoint, there's a lot of risk. So it makes sense. But it looks like we're turning a corner, and these are going to start to be rolled out more and more. Now, Anthropic had some major issues lately with especially Claude code, and there was basically three big issues, which one was a reasoning effort. So on March 4th, they changed the default from high reasoning to medium. And then they had a caching bug, and people were people were recognizing that Claude seemed to forget things really quickly. And then they also had a overall worse quality that was a result of a cap in the system prompt. So these three things, people are surprised to find that the issues with Claude Code, because people had noticed this downgrade of the results that they were getting out of it, they were surprised that they were major engineering decisions that have resulted and not just, small bugs and things. So I'll give credit here to Richard Altoul for bringing up this issue at Richard Artoul on X. And he was the one that really pointed out that, from what I saw, that these three decisions were the reason for these consequences that lots of people have been noticed with Claude Code decreasing its ability. And it's, on the one hand, a bit surprising to see such big engineering decisions be made that were, caching is like a fundamental nature of the product, right? Capping the system prompt between tool calls is a fundamental nature of the product, and the reasoning effort is a fundamental nature of the product. So they made three major decisions that resulted in a much worse product. And so it's like, why do they not have proper testing in place? But what's really interesting to me is this gets to the question of, how do you properly deploy software in this age? Because Anthropic has been getting so much credit, and rightly so, for releasing products so quickly. But one obvious side effect of that is that you're not going to be able to test them as much as you should. Now, to their credit, the products work. So it's not like you're releasing something and you go in and the whole thing just crashes, right? Which we know has happened to large companies that wait months for rollouts in the past. And so they're releasing new products, it seems like every single day, that are working. They're not just crashing, right? They're doing the job. And so the problem is like, okay, you have a decrease in reasoning or model ability. Well, Anthropic is in an interesting position because so many people came over from ChatGPT and everyone was talking about Anthropic. Their revenue went way, way up recently. And, at the same time, so what is the drawback? Well, they're not going to be able to do as much testing all the time. And how do they then navigate? So that's really the question, is like, if you're in a software environment, if you're building software tools, you should be releasing products faster than ever before. And yet you do want to keep the good experience there for the customers. So it's something that every software company is going to have to work out. Now, let's talk a little bit about this issue with Google investing $40 billion in Anthropic. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this because there's not enough to talk about here. All we really know is they plan to invest $40 billion in Anthropic. This is confirmed by Bloomberg and Reuters and others. And they're giving $10 billion cash and up to $30 billion more in performance targets. Now, what's interesting is, why are they funding their biggest AI rival when they have Gemini? I think the reason, I actually predicted this a few weeks ago. I said that I would not be surprised for Google in the future to open up their AI software layer as an LLM agnostic system that you could select different software, you could select different LLMs underneath. And the reason is because, first of all, it fits the Google philosophy oftentimes, is like, they make money on advertising. They make money by having more users. They want more users in their ecosystem. So you have this dynamic where Google has competed on the AI front and will continue in terms of the strength of their LLM. But as we know, LLMs are going to become commodities. And so you have a really good LLM. Your goal is to then pivot that into owning the software layer where you can capture more of the value. So you start to release the software layer. Google already owns a big part of the software layer anyway. And then once you have the software layer, though, why stay attached to just your LLM, especially if you're Google, right? If Google can own the user, why do they need to funnel them into their own LLM? Maybe they'll make marginally more money, but if they can give a better user experience by allowing you to pick different models or by going into different models automatically for different tool calls based on the strength of the model, why not do that? Optimize the user experience, keep people within the Google ecosystem. It just makes sense. So I actually predicted this several weeks ago that Google could move in this direction. And it doesn't yet indicate that's what they're doing, but it certainly is a step in that direction. They're investing in Anthropic. I think that eventually Google will enable you to choose your model within the Google AI ecosystem. That's my prediction. Now, let's see if there's any other stories we want to publish. I think that might be it for today. And, the last one. So the Xerath H1 is scrubbing toilets, and it's pretty cool to see. I mean, this is a great use of AI. Obviously, even the anti-AI people that don't want AI to take jobs, I don't think are going to be too upset about an AI that's scrubbing toilets. So this is the Xerath H1. It's from a Chinese company called Xerath Robotics, and it is currently in deployment mode, I believe. Let me double check that. Is it deployed? Yes. So it is beyond a prototype. It's in real world use in China, and it's in hotels and airports, shopping malls, supermarkets, for example, and it's cleaning bathrooms end to end. What a great use of AI. I want to see more of this. I think it's hard to make the argument against a robot doing the dirtiest jobs that humans do. And it brings up such an interesting question because, a lot of the arguments by like the anti-AI people is against AI taking jobs. But a lot of those same people complain about the jobs that people have to do. Like, I want robots to be doing all the jobs that humans hate, and then enables humans to do more interesting work and to provide more value. I think the vast majority of humans provide a lot more value than cleaning toilets. I think they're capable of much, much, much more. But if that's what's available on the job market, that's what you take. If robots are doing all of those disgusting and low-level jobs, then presumably there should be more opportunity for humans to do more interesting work. That's just how it is. So we'll see. I mean, will we move into an age of abundance or of an age of upheaval where employment drops and no one can get work and no one's hiring? I think it's more likely to be an abundant type age, but I also think that work is going to remain for sure. I mean, people are still going to have to work to support themselves. And there you have it. So join me next time and we'll talk more about AI news without the hype.